There's truth and there's untruth. But if you stick to the truth, even against the whole world, you're still not mad.
Did you know I was personally dragged into the whistleblowing about the sexual abuse, trafficking of vulnerable women at the non-profit organization with a false accusation by the female central to my story? I had support from some famous people like...
One man told me about being beaten by the police and left permanently disabled because of a woman's false allegation.
Personally, professionally, my efforts, for example, with whistleblowing, were just not something that I sought out to do ever in life. It's just these things evolved, they snowballed. Began with one little thing and it just snowballed. I've shown I just need some help to keep warm and pay the couple of bills I do have, and food and supplies and stuff is kind of on the bottom of my list right now. Right now it's minus 27. Where I am, it's very humid. That people should really pay attention to, because it's not so much about me, it's about you.
Hello, it's January 2026. Now, what I'm going to be discussing in this video is going to be about the consequences of, for example, whistleblowing first-hand knowledge and having evidence of the whistleblowing. Now, I'm not talking about the direct or indirect consequences, say retaliation by those that are being exposed, for example, or an organization that's being exposed, which is basically run by people. But I'm going to be talking about a different set of consequences, and I'm going to be tying this in with the commoner, probably in a couple different ways here, hopefully. Now, before I really get into this, I want to just back up a little bit here and discuss, for example, how we have a few different groups of people in society right now. So, and I'm going to be using descriptives, and just want to say that I'm not going to be expanding on anything. I'm not speaking ill about any of these groups or anything else, but the descriptives are going to be enough that you're going to know who I'm talking about. Now, the first group, for example, we'll call them the mainstream types. The people who, for example, accept official narratives, don't question anything, do what they're told types. Some might call them conformists, call them what you will. And these people simply just more or less just glide through life. Now, there are repercussions, consequences for doing that as well. I'm not going to get into any examples. You can probably fill in the blanks. But these people are just your run-of-the-mill people. Now, notice how I didn't use the descriptive of NPC, because, as I've stated many times, NPCs are on all sides here. But I digress. Now we're going to go into briefly about what we're going to call the alternative types, which encompasses truther and freedom types and people who call themselves awake or whatever. Now, these people more or less go against the grain. No matter what is presented to them, they will go the opposite. Now, these people are anticipated. They've been around forever, along with the ones I just described, the mainstream types. So they're very much anticipated to be in the equation, and that's why there's different flavors of Kool-Aid for everyone. Mainstream, alternative types, and then in alternative types you can break that down as well. Now, within these alternative types, and I've kind of somewhat talked about this in a previous video when I'm talking about, for example, where someone's identity is the cause, or they identify with a cause. There's a difference there. I suggest you go watch that video. Now, there are people within that group who, for example, are a little bit more ambitious, who want to, for example, share things online, posts, videos. They make videos, for example, they're content creators, whatever, and they really think that they're doing something. Really, all they're doing is feeding an echo chamber because the other group is not interested in hearing what has to be said. And in a sense, you can call this virtue signaling when you actually listen or read to what they're saying. Now, these people are a problem only to themselves. For example, when you hear them talk about going to a social media jail, and they take great pride in that because that's probably the closest they'll ever get to any kind of repercussions, you know, in society. Now, these people who are, we'll call them wannabe whistleblowers, they're not whistleblowers truly. They might see themselves as such because they're trying to spread the truth, whatever that may be, on whatever topic, it doesn't matter. And they're causing themselves harm, and that's about it. Harm, for example, having their accounts even taken down, or their content creator, their content being taken down, or whatever. Now, these people fail to see or understand or realize the next part of what I want to talk about, and that is the consequences of being a real, true whistleblower. Someone, for example, sharing first-hand knowledge with actual evidence, things that would not necessarily come to light without their efforts or someone's efforts to bring it to light. There's a difference, because you have these people doing that, and you have other people sharing that, and they think that they're whistleblowers, and that's this second group that I've been talking about. Now, these people in the second group sharing third-party information at best, and speculating and everything else to no end, they cause themselves some harm socially, because people, especially when you have ones that kind of go off into left field down so many rabbit holes that they are completely in their own little world. And I'm not saying this to be mean, I'm simply highlighting an observation. Nothing here I'm stating is an opinion, theory, belief, or want on my part. I'm just trying to set the stage here for what I really want to talk about. Now, socially, these people, other people, whether they be friends, acquaintances, colleagues at their work, just people on the street, will look at them as, you know, okay, you're a little bit out there. No, I'm not saying that they are or they're not. I'm not stating or implying the information that they're sharing is truthful or not. That's not the point here. But that's as far as it goes. An employer, for example, might look at them and say, okay, whatever. You're qualified for the job. Sure, we'll hire you. And if you're doing a good job when you're doing this, then chances are there's really going to be no serious consequences. But here's the thing. People who actually, again, whistleblow first-hand knowledge, for example, being an insider or a former insider, and have evidence of whatever it is that they're saying, these people have a lot of consequences. Now, I've mentioned, for example, how there's consequences, say, for example, retaliation. For example, in my story in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and the injustice and everything else that had followed that, literally destroying my personal, professional reputation, and even physically. And there's videos talking about all that. But there's another consequence here for people like me, and I'm not the only one. And as I've stated many times over many years, there's a plethora of other people you've never heard of who no one is programmed to pay attention to, but these people have done their part and sacrificed everything. And that's something else you want to see, is what was the sacrifices made by true whistleblowers. Sometimes they have to flee to another country. Sometimes they might lose a loved one. They might lose their opportunity to obtain employment, to even physically being disabled through acts of violence to silence them. But the other consequences, what I'm talking about here, which is the focus now, is the consequences in society. Because being a whistleblower, or a true whistleblower, you've not only sacrificed all these other things, but you've sacrificed trust. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, no one's perfect. And even if someone makes an error in life, whether it be somebody that you know, or especially with an employer or colleagues there, no one's perfect. People make mistakes. And these people are going to be worried, oh no, is this person going to expose me for a simple error? Perhaps there's an error that is made, but it's just part of the status quo and no one really thinks about it. But if you have someone who's known to not keep their mouth shut, there's no trust, these people are wondering, do I want this person in my life? Or an employer saying, do I want this person working for me? Because they might just decide, hey, this is worth exposing. So you have a huge element of distrust socially. Now, I'm just going to pause here for a moment. To whistleblow about something is usually something that, for example, is of serious nature, that impacts society, other people greatly. Now again, say for example with an employer, yeah, you could be doing something, say, I'm just going to make this up out of thin air, changing expiry dates on something, or having a product that's defective but still kind of pushing it through. That does impact other people and stuff, but it's maybe to someone out there, who wants to be, and this is the crazy part, is there's people who want to be a whistleblower, which is just beyond me. I can say for myself, and even talking with others, this is not something that I have ever set out to do. It just evolved, it snowballed fast, and before you know it, you're in over your head when you're talking about serious topics. And for somebody who wants to be, yeah, they might see, for example, one of the examples that I've given, or something else, pick something, make something up. Yeah, this is my opportunity. I gotta expose this, and sure, but until they do something, there's no history of them doing it. They're just kind of under the radar. But for somebody who does expose something, they're on the radar, and everyone is like, well, are they gonna rat me out, or what's gonna happen? Especially employers, for example. And this really, really limits your opportunities, especially working in government positions, for example, like I have. They don't want people who are going to not toe the line and keep their mouth shut. So the big thing here is trust. People will look at you like, they might look at you and say, well, good job for being a real whistleblower and showing us the evidence of these things, which at the end of the day doesn't change a single thing, no matter how much evidence you have. And I'm segueing here for a second. I've mentioned how I've had people approach me over the years on various topics like organ trafficking and all this other stuff, and they're asking me, because they know who I am, what should I do? And I've shared my answers in those videos. But there's a trust issue, because are you trustworthy? Now there's a lot of things in my life, say through my professions that I've had and so forth, where I don't disclose anything. And there are a lot of things that maybe people have told me, you know, personal, for example, that I don't tell people. I don't go around telling people because for example, I'm not delusional, thinking that everything has to be wide open because, hey, that's the world we're supposed to live in, type of thing, right? And that's just delusional. And there are bat poop crazy people out there who think like that because they're just bat poop crazy. But when you're on the map for exposing something legitimate and you're a real whistleblower, there's always that in the back of people's minds, professionals of any kind of profession, whether it be medical or in the legal profession of any level, this person could blow the whistle on something. And when people, I see these truther and freedom types from the alternative type category wanting to be like that, it's the stupidest thing that they could ever want for themselves. And I'm just going to wrap this up here, because I can get into a lot of depth on everything that I've been saying here. But when you look at people, especially when they're being interviewed by influencers, and I'm not stating or implying that what these people say are truths or untruths, I'm just gonna give you something to think about. If someone's life is still relatively normal, comfortable, we'll say, especially if their life hasn't been impacted, and they're being promoted as a whistleblower, you really have to ask yourself, how is that possible? They have no consequences by the people, for example, they've exposed, or corporations, nor do they have any social consequences of trust. And this is on any topic, who are being interviewed by these influencers. And these influencers come and go, and I've mentioned this in previous videos as well. And to speculate and say, oh, you know, there's a reason why their lives are not impacted. Perhaps to gain credibility in the beginning, and then maybe have an agenda. I'm not saying or implying that this is always the case. I'm just saying it's possible. If you just apply some logic to it, anything's possible. Or what are they really saying that is going to have an impact on what they're talking about, the source? So keep that in mind as well. But for all the people who are wannabes, and 99% of them don't leave behind their keyboard, really think about what I've just said. You have consequences from those who you're exposing, and social consequences, and is that something you really want? And it's unfortunate that these people, and for example people being interviewed by influencers, all they're doing is muddying the waters of people who are actually trying to expose something, trying to fight for truth, justice, and freedom for people. They're just muddying the waters while they think that they're all great and everything else. Just things to think about. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Some time ago,
I was speaking with someone who we'll say is new to the country, and they have a very high authoritative position, very knowledgeable in their field. And what they were telling me had literally floored me, and I've been living with this knowledge for a very, very, very long time. So what I was told were doctors and people in the medical profession are deliberately misdiagnosing people. So for example, people who have health issues, they're being diagnosed with none. And then people who have no health issues are being diagnosed with health issues. That was told to me. Are being put on an unofficial list. And where it hit home for me was, I'm paraphrasing, told that I'm on that list. People who know me, people who've been following me for years, know that I'm very thorough.
So do you think that the technicians here made a mistake, say for example with reading the imaging?
You come out anything. Okay? I'm telling you, I've seen a case where
I don't want anyone to simply believe my story. What I would like is for people to know my story, because to believe is to make an uninformed conclusion. To believe my story has no value to anyone, especially me. To know the story has value. And for people who've been following me for many years, who have vetted me, have gone through my materials, my evidence and everything else, they know my story. Just remember, I was one man against many. Fighting a losing battle, but I still fought to the end.
That means press on. That means endure. That means God cannot fail, and you're not going to give up. That's not an option for a child of God. This means you are going to be remembered. Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me all the time, when is it going to get easier? When you die.